Hello, everyone. It's definitely been a while. A lot has happened in life recently that has prevented me from making videos entirely, namely technological issues, but regardless, I'm happy to be back and finally making something again. That said, I believe it's good to know that I'll be uploading whenever I feel it is right. I'm not going to have a rigid upload schedule or anything like that. I'm just going to upload when I feel those creative juices running through my veins again. Like now, over the last few months, I've been feeling more tired than usual. Now that got me thinking, what does it mean to be tired? Well, if a person feels tired, then obviously something about what they're experiencing makes them feel tired. However, there is just as much a physical component as there is a cognitive one. One can feel tired, or one can be tired. The word tired can be used to describe many sensations. I'm tired of this. I'm incredibly tired. I'm about to pass out, etc. And of course, to blend them together, I'm tired of feeling tired. It opens up a paradox of tiredness I'm not unfamiliar with, as I'm often tired of being tired. It's possible that feeling tired is a protective mechanism to discourage us from doing things when we don't find joy in doing, namely work. Naturally, we have a desire to do the things we like to do, and very rarely do we feel tired while doing these things. In that case, maybe doing something boring or unfulfilling opens up the mental space to focus on tiredness. Or maybe it's a feeling that can easily be grabbed and pulled in to fill that void where joy once was. Either way, it's likely contingent on the individual. There are so many reasons out there for why somebody can be or feel tired. Fatigue is probably the most common symptom ever for anything, as it's one of the easiest things to feel. I think the important distinction to make here is if you're feeling too tired, because more often than not, people have a reasonable gradation for how tired they should be. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if most people were just tired of their lives. Even though doing the same thing every single day and abiding by a strict schedule can be comforting for some, it can also be oppressive. I'm not a person who steps out of my own boundaries very often. I commonly feel tired. In the moments I step out of this boundary, I usually don't have the attention span to focus on tiredness and everything else that's new around me at the same time, so I don't feel tired. For a moment, tiredness is put aside in a rush of adrenaline. I can't claim to know how tiredness functions precisely, but as I said before, part of it is cognitive and part of it is bodily. My body can feel tired if my muscles are stressed, and that can correlate with my mentality, so therefore I feel tired. Somebody who is under constant stress, for example, running away from a bear during an attack, is not likely to feel tired even if their muscles are burnt out and aching because of the intensity of the moment. Right now, I suppose I'm too tired to make any constructive comments on what is normal in relation to what we feel. In essence, I'd say that normal is a feeling in itself. Conceptual, obviously, but a feeling nonetheless, just like tiredness. Trying to cram the concept of a normality into words feels like reducing the meaning of it. But honestly, yeah, I don't think anything that feels normal needs a meaning to feel normal. It just does. A signal in our brain that tells us that things are average and predictable. That said, when life is painfully normal, it appears to pass quickly, doesn't it? That's because there isn't anything to remember within those moments that have passed. And without memory, the only thing telling you that time has passed is the belief that it does. Normally, if there isn't anything to remember, there also isn't any elation, sadness, contempt. Basically anything that could directly contrast the feeling of tiredness itself. Everything passes you without the need for the thought of it, or rather passes through you in the midst of a tired days, completely forgotten and left to decompose in the bin of mediocrity and normality. The more I try to follow something like a moral guideline, the trickier all of life becomes. I think people who have strict moral guidelines also expect the same from other people they interact with. What makes this so tricky is that whenever a line is crossed on either side, a bunch of bad feelings erupt that could have been avoided in the first place, ultimately defying the initial reasoning for adopting a moral code in the first place. To introduce peace. I guess this is why we all interact differently with a different set of people, as to not be separated from the group. Some people in this world will encourage you to conjure your own destructive forces, whereas others will tell you to tame them. Even though a mental disorder is no excuse after saying something hurtful towards someone else, it is also no excuse to say something harmful towards yourself. Naturally, a disorder already brings you a tremendous amount of undesirable pain. That's unavoidable. To aggravate that issue by indulging in it, by degrading yourself or thinking poorly of yourself, you are only contradicting your belief that you should be cautious of inflicting those harmful statements upon people. That is avoidable. You are also a person with a responsibility towards yourself, and therefore a component of your aforementioned belief. See what I meant when I said it's tricky? You could return with the argument that the way in which you communicate with yourself is through the medium of your own thoughts. That is true, and is also a problem, because we cannot directly control which thoughts pop up in our heads. But we can attach preventative measures to our brains to ensure the path of positive thinking. The first step is realizing your place as deserving just as much as anybody else in the world. More importantly, deserving of your own kindness. People tend to omit themselves from their own moral guidelines or beliefs because they feel they can handle it or intellectualize themselves out of it. And even if they can, that doesn't mean it's a healthy thing to do. Or maybe they believe that since they are the creators of their own moral guidelines, they are therefore above them. But are they really? When a person attaches themselves to a certain set of moral beliefs, they will stand in opposition to all which contests those beliefs. Because, naturally, any person is bound to a subjective bias, which solidifies their thoughts. Nobody wishes for their thoughts to be unsound, right? The sacrifice that they must make is potentially giving away openness that would potentially change their life for better or worse. And yes, there is only a certain level of toleration that can exist within the conscious world. We are made to feel pain and to suffer for a reason. That reason being the incentivization of change. I don't believe many people go about their days constantly reinforcing their values to themselves, because more often than not, the sentiment of something feeling wrong is unconscious behavior. We don't perpetually need to be focusing on the things that could harm us or what we could do in order to prevent that harm towards ourselves or other people. It's like a compass that directs itself. Stipulations are largely found within the working force, or within something more visceral like a relationship. For example, you can be working a job without believing in the nature of the work itself, but you still need the money, right? Or maybe you feel a strong urge to tell your significant other something that could possibly ruin the relationship forever. What do? These moral pinches in which you are reduced to following a code of sorts generate a lot of pain. I believe, as a whole, we could all be kinder to ourselves. This doesn't mean you have to tell yourself positive things every day, because even doing as little as acknowledging that you deserve more inwardly kindness is enough to enforce change. It may also help to take a step back from the immensity of all things. Emotions are just sensations that will rise and pass. It's becoming easier to realize why people develop an emotional reticence as they age. I've never been the gregarious guy shouting from the rooftops, but it's safe to say that as a youthful kid, I was once more representative of what resides beneath. As people develop moral values in life, it becomes far more likely you'll come across somebody who tells you that your beliefs are wrong, that you, in essence, as a person, are wrong, or at the very least unstable. If not your own parents, somebody else will do it. So instead of facing the pain of being told that you're wrong, you instead lead a life of bottling up emotions. Most people tend to care about what other people think, so instead of deciding that they don't care and expressing their emotions anyway, they hold back. Things can get worse than this, sure. You meet somebody and they obtain a general idea of you until you lose control of that boundary you've set up to hold your emotions. Maybe you yell at them, or maybe you do something they thought you would never do. Maybe they're just looking for a reason to express their own instability to procure attention. Either way, it will tell you that they, in fact, didn't know the real you until now. This action only furthers the instability within the person desperately trying to hold things together. This brings me back to the point I've stated before, and that's that a lot of people in this life will look at you as a reflection of themselves before seeing you as an individual person. This can happen in a relationship or in the job world for what may seem like different reasons but actually serve the same purpose or very similar purpose. Basically, the employee reflects the employer, and so on until you reach the top. If the employee continues to drink on the job, despite being reprimanded time after time, the employer and the employee will be considered unfit for the job regardless of their intentions. Instead of seeing the employee as a person who needs help, or the employer who likes to grant multiple chances for reformation, they instead see the employee as a bad, worthless drunk, and the employer as somebody who is too weak-willed to fire the employee. When in actuality, maybe the employer has a personal experience with alcoholism and knows that the employee can reform. A belief that is infinitely times stronger than the will to fire somebody, but is neglected for the sole premise of not looking bad. In the case of the relationship, I'm sure it doesn't require ample explanation. When people fall in love, they entrust their partner with the reassurance that they had made the right decision in falling in love with them. If that reassurance is somehow compromised, then it's all over. At the end of the day, it's understandable. All of it is. Most people wish to live their lives with the least amount of pain conceivably possible. And so it's easier for them to rid their lives of people experiencing pain, lest they feel it themselves.
Hey, there, Winch. Coach.
What is smart to me might be entirely different from what is smart to you. If you are smart, you do stuff, right? That's the only smart thing I've figured out yet. If I make you my boss, you are smart. You are brilliant and you know how to run a business. You make it work. If you are smart, you know how to keep your employees happy and healthy. If you are smart, you know how to schedule a team, handle an issue, change priorities and plans, and respond to emails. If you're smart, you know the difference between effective leadership and an abusive leadership. If it's not coming across, I actually have no idea what it means to be smart. The best I can say is that I know it when I see it, but that presumes that I am smart, which is a shaky presumption. I think human intelligence is far too broad and diverse to quantify, and to attempt to do so is, well, stupid. I don't even want to talk about IQ tests. I think those were a horrific invention. I'm not saying this because I have a lower than desirable IQ. I don't even know what my IQ is, and I don't want to. I just think it's the peak of hubris to think that some humans can quantify how intelligent other humans are. I suppose the ability to memorize vast quantities of information is one small type of intelligence, but it is of little value on its own. And I say that as someone who routinely memorizes stuff for no other reason than I am interested in having it memorized. I think schools emphasize memorization because it makes teachers' jobs easier. Tests that involve memorization are the simplest to create and to grade. They're also the most objective and therefore the fairest, and that there is little subjectivity involved in determining if an answer is correct. However, I would not paint all higher education with such a negative brush. Some colleges are inherently mindless, and sometimes it's the teacher that makes them that way, but others can be wonderful. Educators, colleges, and departments are people, or comprised of people, and they run the gamut. If I was to throw an answer out there, I would say there is a familiarity between intelligence and openness to learn new things, and to accept a foreign truth. Naturally, when information from another person comes streaming in, and it's far away from what one wants to hear, it's completely ignored, never given the proper chance. I'm not saying one should accept everything another person says, but one should be open to all possibilities, regardless of how insane or contrarian that thought might be. To think conspiratorially and put yourself out there is to open yourself up to truths you may have never acquired otherwise, possibly even coming to some sort of revelation about your own beingness. It's unfortunate, but some people have really become self-absorbed and emotionally immune to openness. It's as if they feel it isn't relevant to their daily life, which is a short-sighted and dangerously sick approach to information intake. I see more and more people becoming more and more insular because the collective ignorance and hatred of the other at this point in history. And that's a losing battle. I see it in my own family, in the endless Facebook debates about the infallibility of so-and-so, the rationale behind why someone else is wrong, and the relative importance of whatever a particular issue is at any given moment. They're too wrapped up in their own insecurities and fears to see what's really going on. These are basic coping mechanisms. It's understandable for people to protect themselves from the truth. They really have no choice, for the most part. But when it gets to the point where you literally refuse to see people for who they are, especially when those people are visibly suffering, it's a pitiful state of mind, and anyone who accepts this as normal and completely normalizes the behavior is a terrible example to anyone else. At the end of the day, I suppose we could go about this forever. Theoretically, the chain of relativity is unending. But hopefully through spitting some of these words, I've allowed you to become more open and less resistant to the things and people and ultimately the experience of anything around you, because at a fundamental level, these things are the only things we have. By saying, this answer is wrong, you are also cutting everything else out. What if everything was correct? What if all of this was meant to be? What if, against all odds, you're actually Superman or Batman or anything you think as higher power?